In case you didn't know, the word canon is typically interpreted in fiction as a collection of works which are considered to be fact, and I put heavy emphasis on the quotation marks on that because it can be pretty much changed at any moment via a single tweet from the creators. Conversely, however, a headcanon is something that you personally believe to be true, despite there being little to no evidence for it, or in some cases it might actively go against the canon, but you don't care because hey, it's neat. And after 5 years of playing the game, I have my own personal takes on what happens on the happier side of Brawl Stars lore, and since story mode is getting postponed, I might as well throw a few out there while we wait for any semblance of a story. I'm a Turnip. Today we're going to get to the bottom of this and below, and welcome to Sub-Zero. It's been nearly half a decade since Shelly's inception, and we finally have confirmation about her relationship to Colt. Well, kinda. We know she works with Colt at the jailhouse, but that's about it. And rather than being a deputy or sheriff, my headcanon is that she's actually a mercenary for hire that decided to stay with Colt for whatever reason. Once a part of the Gold Arm gang, he left not because he saw the error of his ways, but rather because he needed the attention to fuel his narcissistic hero complex. Spike's original backstory was him being created in a shootout via two cowboys, and I'd like to think it was actually during Colt's redemption arc that he was created. If Colt was a part of the Gold Arm gang and decided to leave when he no longer wanted to be a villain, I imagine there was a time in a heist where Colt stood up for himself, resulting in a typical cowboy standoff, leading to the creation of the happy cactus we all know and love, perhaps with the help of a little something else. Nita is a rabid child who will go absolutely feral under any circumstances, which is something I can respect, and while there aren't that many kids in the game, Grom's PTSD had to come from somewhere, and out of all the kids we know about, Nita seems like the most likely candidate to give him a scar, both physically and psychologically. He's a bully through and through, but still has a passion for cooking, which is the main reason he opened his diner. And by cooking, I mean deep frying anything and everything on the face of the earth. He's a big fan of rhythm games. Sometimes he gets a little too enthusiastic though. This robot has nearly as many backstories as Spike. He's a pool bot, a gumball machine, and an assassinating automaton all in one. His personality is kinda mysterious, but in my opinion, he's more like a Terminator robot who might spare you, if you're cool enough. Apparently they really want to give off the vibe that this walking arcade cabinet is insane, which is fair considering he's a patient in what is most likely a mental hospital, but still, more than half of the arcade trio just wakes up on a daily basis and chooses violence. I'd like to think that they both hate humans too, but Brock is just too cool for them to hate, which, now that I'm thinking about it, is basically just the opposite of the Gold Arm gang trio. Less of a headcanon about Nani and more about Peep because I love the fact that they made the flying eyeball its own sentient character. Does he have a personality? Can he communicate? I'm really concerned with the ethics of having his quote-unquote friend drive him straight into a wall. Uses more hair products in his mustache daily than most people do in a lifetime, despite the fact that no one will ever see it. In several of the real-world Disney parks lie secret bars, and at one time were the only place known to serve alcohol in the entire park, and while his drinks were confirmed to be non-alcoholic in Time to Explain, I imagine he keeps a speakeasy hidden somewhere in case of emergency. Once an actor that tragically died while filming a soap opera, Poco was brought back to the land of the living to spread his sweet serenade, and play at Barley's bar, of course. With the deep connection she forms with the plant she grows, Rosa is actually the opposite of a vegetarian, instead opting to live on a meat-only diet, which she insists Sprout must do too in order to grow up big and strong. B does not know how to feel about this. Pam doesn't realize the true scope of what Jessie is able to do. Like, she knows about Scrappy, but Pam just kind of assumed that she found it in the dump and fixed it up, rather than actually building it. Peep, whose whole responsibility is watching over this child, is constantly freaking out, watching a 10-year-old use blowtorches, saws, and heavy machinery, but he can't tell anyone because he doesn't have a mouth. Dynamite is one of the few characters with actual lore in the description, changing from being a retired miner wanting to blow stuff up to someone who got lost down a mine and came back absolutely insane, implying he was down there for years and possibly even decades. But the gem mines aren't exactly the most hospitable place in the park, so what did he eat to survive? Well, sure, there are mushrooms down there, but as we heard Ranter say on the WKBRL stream,
why are they green? Why are they purple? Why are they such delicious flavors looking colors? Why do they look like you want to eat them?
I'd like to think that he survived by literally eating the gems, and that's the reason why he's missing so many teeth. Brawl Stars lore has so many colorful questions, like who thought it would be a good idea to give a bomb sentience, and why'd they make it so heckin' cute? And I know the community has some strong opinions on Tick, but I do not care. This boy is the cutest brawler in the game, and you cannot change my mind on that. That's not even a headcanon, that's a fact, and you can fight me on this. Seeing as Jessie, the mechanic, and Penny are friends, I'd like to imagine Daryl and Tick were built by Jessie so she could live out a life on the open seas, rather than being built in the robot factory like most of the other robots. I used to think she was closer in age to an adult, but considering she's friends with Jessie, it's more probable that the age gap between them is smaller than that. I'm still assuming she's older than Jessie, but she's more likely a teenager than anything else. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else, but his deep dark secret is that he failed algebra in high school and cannot let anyone know. or else Jackie would lord it over him forever. Despite my headcanon that Jackie uses a colorful variety of swears, did you know Jackie actually isn't cursing in her voice lines? Which is probably because it's supposed to be a family-friendly game, but something you may not know is that they've actually used lighter swears before in the game's promotional material. So Supercell, if you're listening, let Jackie say I know I said in an earlier theory that Gus was part of his feud, and I may have been wrong about that. My argument was that Spike was the symbol of the mascot union due to Spike being one of Star Park's mascots, and the person who delivered the Star Park package to Gambo was wearing a mask, and Gus's obsession with Spike may have been somehow related to this. But I'm actually going to go with Occam's Razor with this one and say that it's probably the simplest answer, which, as some people pointed out in the comments, it's probably just that Spike pops balloons mixed with him being creepy. But I don't care, because I'll be long dead in the grave before I stop believing that this sassy blonde child isn't a part of a union trying to blow up Star Park. I also mentioned this in an earlier theory, but Bo being Nita and Leon's stepdad kinda changes everything, because these are Nita's parents, as confirmed by Kairos Tim, and this man is absolutely not Bo. See, Leon is wearing the green hoodie, and Nita gets her bear, both tying them to their respective character, but the dad is missing any connection to him whatsoever, and if they really wanted to connect him to Bo, they could have easily given him one of the many eagle hats shown in the previous scene. So if this isn't Bo, and one of the parents would have had to remarry, this means that at least one of the parents had to survive the crash. You know, because divorced couples typically don't go to Disney World together. So the question is, where is Nita's parent now? Well, I think we've already seen them. We know who Bo's married to. Maybe they didn't survive the crash and came back as a spirit animal. That's right, Bo is married to... The popular theory is that EMZ stands for electromagnetic zombie, but just like RT, I doubt we're ever going to get confirmation of that. Honestly, it's possible it doesn't even stand for anything at all. My headcanon is that it's just her online username, and her real name is something lame, like Emily. He used to own a go-kart track, but due to an unfortunate stunt accident involving Bonnie, the entire place got blown up, so they moved to the Stunt Show instead. She's Poco's ex from a long time ago, with the rose in Serenade Poco's mouth being the same one missing from Piper Calavera's headband. Before Jessie had been born, she was an engineer who designed a ton of the ride schematics, but quit when things started becoming corrupt. The whole he can't talk thing is actually completely made up, and it's just his way of trying to get out of conversations with Mortis. A few months back, I made a mini-theory explaining how this pointed arrow seems to stand for boss, with it being on Mr. P and the boss indicator in weekend events, and that Bull having it on his back points to him being the leader of the gang. But recently, he was given a small remodel, and do you know what got removed? That's right, the boss symbol got taken away from his skull logo. And while it's probably complete coincidence, that means that my headcanons for BB is back. She gatekeeps, she gaslights, and this girl boss is the leader of the trio. Also, she has a soft spot for Ticket because he's genuinely adorable when he's not being the most insufferable thing on the planet. The standard goth kid may get annoyed by Colette's aggressive friendship, but in secret, he deeply appreciates her. I like to think that the two have been friends in childhood, and even though she may be embarrassing to him, he'll always tolerate her, because she's done the same to him. He wears the mascot suit to hide from the cops. Considering Grom speaks in Russian or Russian idioms, and the only other member of his trio speaks Scottish English to a degree that even I can't understand, I subscribe to the theory that Grom physically cannot understand anything that Ash is saying, which results in some very wacky hijinks while on the job. It's a common trope for children to run away and join the circus in a lot of pieces of media, and there are actually a few cases of this happening in the late 19th century during their peak. So rather than being orphans like most of the kids in Star Park, I'd like to think that Janet and Bonnie ran away for whatever reason and got adopted by Stu, who was happy to take care of some kids on his own. I agree completely with Castawil Uwu that Hank deserves a beautiful, luxurious tale. But considering he seems to be missing one, my theory is that he lost it while in a tense battle with a chef in Star Park, considering it's canon that he's the survivor of the kitchen. Like a lot of landlords, Mortis is a malevolent bloodsucker who relies on the income from his tenant Frank, and seems to put the bare amount of effort into repairs and renovations. Bonus, he's not actually a vampire considering his lack of fangs, he's just a normal guy who's become deathly pale due to the amount of lead in his 200-year-old Victorian mansion. If you look at Tara's kit description, it states that her black hole cracks open a portal to another dimension, where shadowy versions of herself can pop out to assist her, and similarly, Cordelius' super is a mushroom that sends foes to the Shadow Realm, which is confirmed to be another dimension. Sounded familiar? I think her shadows come from the Shadow Realm, and it could be a similar case with Lola's ego. Seriously though, what's up with all these shadow versions of Brawlers? I'm actually surprised he doesn't get sucked back into the lamp in his losing animation, since just as hand comes out of the lamp, perhaps there's something far scarier lying within the confines of that ancient relic, desperately clawing at any way to get out. She's the only one buying energy drinks in the entirety of the park. In fact, her business is the sole thing propping up the energy drink economy, which is literally just recycled nuclear waste. Turns out it's really good for powering robots, and giving you detrimental heart conditions. I like how everyone just kind of collectively agrees that he's one of the villains of this universe, despite the fact that he's just a very sad middle-aged man in a penguin suit. Okay, real talk, I genuinely believe this thing is more menacing than Spike, and it has some ulterior motive that's just completely horrific. I don't know what it is, but I know Flora is evil in this world, with Cordelius's mushrooms taking over her mind and Spike being himself, so I do not trust this thing no matter how cute it tries to be. It will stab you in the back, it will sell your soul, and it will do it all with absolutely no emotion, no hatred, no anger, just a complete and utter sociopath. His real name is Byron von Serpentine, which is a very real name that he uses despite the fact that he's probably not German, but it makes him sound more regal, and it's good for business when he's trying to persuade gullible customers into thinking that he's reputable, and not just selling them actual poison. He's the kind of child who eats glue, but to be fair, he's actually able to digest it because of his unique chemistry. Would he eat it even if he couldn't gain nutritional value from it? Probably, but try not to judge. He definitely can speak, considering he makes pew noises with his finger guns, and he's just being smug about it. Regardless, he's fluent in sign language, and him and Spike have lengthy conversations in it. She's no longer allowed in the snowtail. Not after the incident. The entire purpose of her tunnel of love is to break up couples because true love makes her vomit, though she only hates it because she had a bad breakup in high school that she never really got over. I imagine he's a vegetarian who will not eat his own hot dogs, mostly because the type of dinosaur he's based off of are also herbivores. Don't ask me why he's okay with selling them though, maybe they aren't even real meat. Actually, I don't want to know what they're made of. While I'm not sure if it's actually canon or not, the Investor Video's animation segment shows Crow, Mr. P, and Bo as stepbrothers, with the WKBRL audio clarifying the connection of them all having the same mother. Since Bo's family tree wasn't clear until the Rumble Jungle update, this may not reflect their actual relationship, if they even have any, but if it is, it would mean that Crow is at least somewhat human, just like his avian counterparts, though the only real evidence of this is a single community post made all the way back in beta, describing him as half human, so this could very well have been retconned. There's a very interesting piece of dialogue in the rancher's speech that has a darker implication.
What's behind door number 1? Feral children running in the jungle!
The keywords children in the jungle obviously corresponds to Leon and Nita, but feral children are actually a phenomenon that occur in the real world, where young children who grow up raised with very little social contact experience stunted psychological growth, resulting in side effects like a lack of language skills that is typically normal for kids their age. Kind of like Nita. But weirdly enough, Leon doesn't have this, and so it's possible that the two actually somehow got separated at some point in their lives, with Leon being raised normally and Nita being raised by bears. Wait. Sandy and Daryl are actually best friends who really bond over sleeping. It may be the only thing they have in common, but at least they get along well. Since Max wouldn't let her join the fight, she became a vigilante protecting the streets at night. She lost every fight she was in, but hey, at least she tried. He was blessed by a god of trickery, but rather than using his powers to take over the world or something like that, he prefers to upload prank compilations to YouTube. He may seem nice, and he is, but with the way his boss pushes him around, he's just constantly one step away from snapping at all times. Him and Brock have a rivalry to see who can host the craziest parties. It has resulted in numerous casualties. Every single brawler in the game is terrified of her, except Piper, because she is the only character in the game who can match her chaotic energy, hence why they're best friends. Contrary to what you'd think, Lou is actually able to sell a ton of snow cones, despite a snowy mountain not being the ideal setting for a snow cone demand. No one is entirely sure why, but it does correlate directly with the amount of food items thrown at Mr. P. He's actually a very good dad, and is not above threatening anyone who bullies his child. To be frank, we know that something happened to the robot factory that Sam and Belle likely worked at, but we're not given a lot of information after that. I'm not sure that the creators would ever get graphic enough to go into a factory accident as bad as this one, but it's not implausible that Belle somehow lost it due to a machinery malfunction, leading to their hatred of robots. But to be perfectly honest, it's much more likely that it's something as simple as robots replacing their jobs, causing them to turn to a life of crime. But I prefer just a taste of something a little deeper than that. This Splashing Saurus is a one-of-a-kind reptile, in that he really isn't one, or so we're led to believe. See, Buzz is actually wearing a mascot suit, as we can see by the stitches in his model and in his voice lines. And other mascots in this world, like Mr. P, are absolutely human, as we can tell by his human skeleton in the Brawlween animation. And it's the same case with Griff, who sports a ripped glove showcasing a human finger. But take a look at the Bad Randoms music video, and you won't find a human skeleton, but rather a dinosaur one. And if you look at all the voice lines, there's not a single point of evidence suggesting he's human. So I'd like to believe that underneath the suit is literally just a more realistic looking Buzz. While it was confirmed that Ash is human by the concept artist that created him, I still like to believe deep in my heart that he actually isn't, because while many know that he's Scottish, a nod to Paul's cultural background, there's also another creature that originates from Scottish folklore called the brownie. Brownies are hobgoblins or household spirits that enjoy cleaning and helping the servants of the house, but if you start leaving all the work to them, they'll start getting annoyed, or at times straight up malicious. They're often described as short-tempered and will take offense easily. Scottish, short-tempered, and likes to clean? That does bear a striking resemblance to a certain trash knight. Oh, and bonus headcanon, his super of rats stands for rodent attack targeting system. Once again, while their connection may not be as canon as I'd like to believe, I still like to think of Colette and Lola as being long-lost sisters or cousins in some way, mostly due to the teeth, looks, and general lack of self-control. He only started working at the Turbo Theater because he has a crush on Shelly, who occasionally visits from time to time. Buster followed to be a wingman and was even the one who showed him all the Kung Fu VHS tapes where he learned his moves. Somewhere in the universe is a dad who owes more in child support than the GDP of a small country. It's essentially canon at this point, but he's some sort of squid creature that makes his own ink paint. Management has several issues with him painting his own body fluid on the park's walls. Belle makes a habit of calling him Sammy only because it makes him mad. In an effort to look cooler, he wears his sunglasses all the time. The darker the sunglasses, the better. In fact, his are so cool that they are completely blacked out. Candyland wasn't always in the sky, but rather a part of the castle courtyard at one time. Manty just got so fed up with Chester at one point that she literally detached the entirety of the kingdom to try and get away from him. But it didn't work on Chester. You can never escape from Chester. His second half is actually a separate sentient entity, but they occasionally get into arguments. The only issue with this is that this isn't common knowledge and nobody else can hear the other half, so it constantly sounds like he's talking to himself. This is more of a full theory, but if you look at the very end of the investor video, you can see the full-scale collapse of the park. Specifically, you can see smoke in two places, that being behind Metropolis, and then another close to Mortis Mortuary. The reason that's important is that Maisie's entire character design is based around fire safety. Her hair and attacks are both designed around fire suppressant foam, plus a ton of her voice lines and even her angry pen, which shows her brandishing a no fire sign. And while the layout of Star Park is dubious to say the least, we have been shown time and time again that Turbo Theater is right next to Haunted Haven, aka Mortis Mortuary. My best guess is that Maisie somehow lost her arm due to a fire-related accident, and not wanting anyone else to meet the same fate, decided to become a hero herself. Cordelius is legitimately insane. This poor little guy went a little bit too far in the forest and never came out the same. His name is a pun on the word cordyceps, a mind-controlling fungus which preys on insects, and mixed with the voice line "never trust a shroom in a raincoat" implies that he's not human, but rather the mushrooms themselves hidden in the hazmat suit, and by extension his host's body. But considering the connection of him being the Star Park gardener, and now seeing Gale gardening at the start of the investor video, I'd like to think that the person Cordelius was before was someone who looked like Gale. It's not like it's the first time we've seen duplicates. Judging from her voice lines, Pearl is obviously a mother, but who exactly is she a mom to? Well, considering she was built by Sam and Belle, it's probable that they built her to make cookies for their actual kids, though I use plural skeptically, even if it is kind of alluded to in her and Sam's voice lines. But I'd also like to think Barley, mostly because it's fun, since it was confirmed that these brawlers aren't really related and only have similar eyepieces because they're part of the same series. While it's possible that she's somehow the first of all the one-eyed robots in the park, judging from her connection to the Gold Arm Gang and their implied ties to the Robot Factory, I'd like to think she holds a special connection to Barley. Similar passive-aggressive mannerisms, both producing steam when angry, similar eye expressions. Is it a coincidence? Probably. Just don't ask me how a robot can be a mom. Poco is a huge admirer of Chuck's work, with a lot of his music being directly inspired by his spooky scores, mostly because they're both, dead. Probably, it's not really confirmed. And for the moment, that's every brawler. But what are some of your headcanons? Make sure to leave them in the comments below, and have a day as bright as the stars.